We are back. Welcome back to the King's Report this Monday, September 18th, 2017. This is Second King Hyungjin Sean Moon, broadcasting all the kings and queens of the Kingdom of God. We're now joined with Dan Gray. Started his political journey with Watergate when he was very young. Back then he was a progressive, but over the decades since then, year after year, issue after issue, the movement left him. Dan still fights for the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, for equal protection under the law, and since he's now in his late 50s, for our historical heritage. Dan's been involved in the NRA for over 25 years, successfully sued SEIU in federal court, works closely with Right to Work and Right to Life organizations and activists, has been a columnist for Watchdog and the Washington Times, and has spoken passionately on radio and in person on just about every liberty issue there is. Dan works behind the scenes providing guidance for groups on just about every arc of liberty spectrum, including militias and many local anti-corruption efforts in the Commonwealth and beyond. He helped start a national tax reform think tank last year and counts his efforts with newcomers to the movement as those he's most proud of. Last year, Dan was Schuylkill County Chair for the Cruz campaign here in Pennsylvania and has been both surprised and pleased with the performance of President Trump so far. Dan, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Oh, good morning. It's wonderful to be here, even though I'm not really a morning guy, as Dan Johnson, who I believe you know, he calls this hour stupid o'clock.
Well, now we can actually see you. Your video has finally broken through.
I got it working, yeah. And this is what I'm dealing with this morning. This is my my coffee cup, and it's no Zoom involved, so it's about a half gallon. And
wow,
I should be fine this morning.
That's quite a mug, I have to say myself. My mug pales in comparison to that. Thank you for joining us this morning. If you could give us a little bit about your background and the work that you're doing, let our audience know about some of the work you've done.
Well, back in the very early 70s, a cousin of mine named Bud Hammerman was a public official in Maryland, and he worked with Spiro Agnew, who was the vice president at the time. And even though he's an honest guy, he got tempted and he became Spiro Agnew's bag man. This is what started Watergate. It wasn't the break-in. It was actually a grand jury investigation into the vice president. And my cousin did the right thing. He fessed up. He told the truth. He went to jail. He paid 100% of all fines and reparations. He's the only one who went to jail, by the way. Everybody else got a pass, all the crooked ones. And that's what started it. So I was watching the Watergate hearings from gavel to gavel. And I was proud of this country, proud that a president, the most powerful man in the world, who had become corrupt, was removed. He just was gone. And at that time, if you cared about the Constitution, if you cared about individual rights, equal justice under law, if you didn't like the idea of corporations buying and selling politicians and getting us into unjust wars, you had to be a progressive. Unfortunately, that movement left me. I worked for Wade Rathke, who founded Acorn when he started the Denver chapter back in 1978. And I started to get a glimmer. And then and this is kind of a personal story. I won't mention their names, but I had a girlfriend. I wanted to marry her. And I had a best friend who I was we were inseparable. Well, she got pregnant and with his kid. And so needless to say, I lost a best friend and I lost a girlfriend. But I still cared for them both, and they both still trusted me, even though I had some reasons not to necessarily trust them. So I got both of them separately, without talking to each other, were talking to me to say, what do we do? We were all very, very young, and they had a baby coming, and we talked about abortion. And we came to the conclusion, after long discussions independently, that this was a human life that had done nothing wrong, that deserved a chance, and that sacrifices on an adult level needed to be made. So they got married, and they raised a kid who now has a kid of his own. He's middle-aged now. And I'm really glad about that. Now, their marriage didn't last. That's a shame. But they made the right choice. once that happened, issue after issue over the years, I ran for Republican judge of elections as a joke with some friends of mine, and I was working for the police department in Philly at the time. And they said, "Why don't you run for it against Lucian Blackwell, who was the king of Philadelphia corrupt politics?" His brother actually ran the numbers in Philadelphia. He was a gangster. I ran and I got on the ballot, and it looked good. Here's a white boy going in a black neighborhood, door to door, dressed up in a suit, respectfully asking these people for their vote and telling them that I cared about the integrity of an election. Wow. Well, they tried to remove me from that office and eventually succeeded. I did the training. I was there. I wanted a clean election. We had the Louis Farrakhan Nation of Islam guys showed up, 7-foot tall guys, bald head, big muscles. And they tried to threaten me. But like I said, I've been doing martial arts since I was 14, so that didn't work. They sent a police captain who I knew, tried to get me out of there, threatened me with arrest. That didn't work. Finally, I got a call from a very high-ranking public official in Philadelphia who said, "You've got to leave. We will arrest you, and you'll get paid anyway." And so I left, but I hung around and I watched after the polls closed as busloads and carloads of people came to vote after the polls had closed, and they'd been voting other places. I followed them in my car. We call them the Woodland Park contingent.
That was taught by Project Veritas. Did you see this with James O'Keefe catching the DNC?
Oh yeah, up in New Hampshire. James is a friend of mine. He's an awesome guy.
Oh man, amazing.
So the Woodland Park contingent is based on the title. The title's based on Woodland Park, which is a cemetery in Philadelphia, where it's been closed for burials for well over 100 years. But these people were so patriotic that they still get out there and vote multiple times every election. And I couldn't get satisfaction from the supposedly nonpartisan committee, the Committee of 70 in Philadelphia. That's the watchdog group for elections. I couldn't get the League of Women Voters to help me. I couldn't get anyone in the news to talk to me. And then at the time, I was also working selling jewelry and making jewelry on Sansom Street in Philadelphia. And so I applied for a carry permit for a firearm because it's a dangerous job to go out there with something worth $10,000 or more on your person, and passed everything and found out that the only people who could get that were politicians and their friends at the time in Philadelphia. Yeah. So then I got robbed. I was I was a busy guy, so I was driving a cab at the time. I got robbed a couple of times. So basically, I joined the NRA at that time. So issue by issue, the movement left me. And I started studying more about our founders, and especially Madison and Jefferson and the ones who wrote the Constitution. And I read the Federalist Papers. And bit by bit, I came to realize that there was no left or right. There was no real dichotomy between the Democrats and the Republicans. What there was honest, fair American values, constitutional values, and then everything else. And all I could see in power was everything else. So I worked behind the scenes for decades. Then, as a shop steward for SEIU, I worked for the state of Pennsylvania as an unemployment claims examiner at the time. I'm cutting out a bunch of stuff because we're going a little long on this one, and I don't like to talk about myself, but this is history. I wanted out. They wouldn't let me out. I got some help from the National Right to Work Legal Defense Foundation, and I sued them in federal court. We went through all kinds of stuff where they wouldn't even admit there was a suit or admit that I'd asked. I didn't sign in blood under the full moon in triplicate and send it to them within 3 days of the contract expiration, etc. So I got out. They settled. They caved. And that wasn't good enough. So I issued a religious exemption, a religious objection, and said that you support abortion. You support killing babies, and I don't. I don't want my money used for that. So now my money was being escrowed, and I had them send it. This is great. The president and the treasurer of SEIU Local 668 had to send a check every 3 months to the Pennsylvania Right to Work, Pennsylvania Right to Life Education Foundation. So that was nice. But that wasn't enough. In the past, if you were a union member, you would pay this much. This is your dues. But if you were working for the state, and this is still true today, you had no choice. You had to pay fees. And this is what fees were. Dollar, 98.6 cents of a dollar. So really, there was no reason not to be a union member. Well, I insisted on an audit. That's another thing that I was legally entitled to do according to the Supreme Court. And I got an audit, and even their own in-house union audit firm, that's all they do is audit unions, had to admit that there were problems. So we dropped it, and it dropped from this to this. And I got another one, and I took them back to court, and it dropped to this. It's currently around 55 cents to a dollar. So in other words, if you have to pay, you're only paying 55 cents rather than paying a dollar if you're a fees payer versus a dues payer. And that costs them, I think we're up to about $6 million since 2012. That's money they can't use to promote abortion, to promote gun control, I guess they call it, taking away people's rights. They can't use it to put behind politicians of the Democrat or Republican Party who are corrupt. And so I'm getting to the end of this, believe me, I've cut it real short. So a guy named Mike Henry, who worked for Heritage Action at the time, he heard about this and wanted to meet me. I told him my story, and he said, "Oh, you got to come to the Pennsylvania Leadership Conference in Harrisburg." So I went, and the main speaker that year was Jim DeMint. And for your listeners who may not be aware of him, Jim DeMint was a senator, the second poorest, so he's an honest U.S. senator. And he was from a safe district. He had just been reelected 2 years prior to this in 2012, and he was or 2013, whatever it was. He was so popular, and he's at retirement age, and he was at a point where he was guaranteed a reelection and maybe one more. And he was doing good work in the Senate. And he had just stepped down from the Senate, indicating he was going to resign to run Heritage Action, the action arm of Heritage, the think tank in Washington, D.C. So I got to meet him at this meet and greet. And you know how those things are. I mean, you're an important guy. I'm sure that when you go to these things, you have a few friends with you who are your aides or assistants or your associates, and you can't monopolize a conversation with a guy who's important because everybody wants to meet him. So after you shake hands, say a few words, generally one of them engages you in conversation, and then the important person turns and talks to other people, and that way they get to work the room, and that's the way it works. Well, I looked at my watch when Mr. DeMint started talking to me, and when he finished, he gave me 6 minutes, and I couldn't understand why. Obviously, he'd had a briefing. He knew an awful lot about my past history, including the history with the left, even before I'd been working on so-called conservative issues. And he urged me to go public, which is something I've never done. I didn't want to. I don't enjoy it. I like privacy. I like to just be a face. I could walk into any place. Nobody knew me. And I asked him, I said, "Sir, in a safe seat and all that, why are you stepping down? You're an honest guy. You're in the Senate. You're doing good work. Why are you stepping down when you've got 4 years of this term and guaranteed another 6 after that?" He said, "At this point, I'm not sure America's got 2 years."
Wow.
And that got me thinking. So I started writing. I wrote for Watchdog, and then the Washington Times pulled me in as a columnist till they eliminated that program entirely. Started doing speeches, started organizing rallies. In other words, doing everything I'd been doing and advising people on how to do for many, many years, but doing it publicly was uh, Colonel Riley. I don't know if anyone knows Colonel Riley, Operation American Spring, but I was his special assistant to help him get that started. And it seemed at that time, and it still seems today sometimes, that has
After this, with more with Mr. Dan Gray.
Car Arms, Magnum Research, and Auto Ordnance. The Car Firearms Group. With a diverse product line that blends American craftsmanship with cutting-edge technology. It's no secret why gun enthusiasts choose Car Firearms Group. From the Desert Eagle and Baby Desert Eagle made famous by Hollywood. The history of the 1911 and the Tommy gun. To the best in compact concealed carry. Car Firearms Group is not only the first name in personal defense, it's a name that has earned the respect of gun enthusiasts around the world. Concealment, innovative technology, value, accuracy, and history. Car Firearms Group. Made in the USA. Visit car.com today. Car Arms, Magnum Research, and Auto Ordnance. The Car Firearms Group. With a diverse product line that blends American craftsmanship with cutting-edge technology. It's no secret why gun enthusiasts choose Car Firearms Group. From the Desert Eagle and Baby Desert Eagle made famous by Hollywood. The history of the 1911 and the Tommy gun. To the best in compact concealed carry. Car Firearms Group is not only the first name in personal defense, it's a name that has earned the respect of gun enthusiasts around the world. Concealment, innovative technology, value, accuracy, and history. Car Firearms Group. Made in the USA. Visit car.com today. Car Arms, Magnum Research, and Auto Ordnance. The Car Firearms Group. With a diverse product line that blends American craftsmanship with cutting-edge technology. It's no secret why gun enthusiasts choose Car Firearms Group. From the Desert Eagle and Baby Desert Eagle made famous by Hollywood. The history of the 1911 and the Tommy gun. To the best in compact concealed carry. Car Firearms Group is not only the first name in personal defense, it's a name that has earned the respect of gun enthusiasts around the world. Concealment, innovative technology, value, accuracy, and history. Car Firearms Group. Made in the USA. Visit car.com today.
Welcome back to King's Report this Monday, September 18th, 2017. And here we are joined with Dan Gray. Now, Dan, you mentioned that you were working with Colonel Riley with Operation American Spring. Can you explain to our viewers what that was? I remember hearing about that and what the status of that is currently.
It was in May of 2014. We had this crazy notion. Colonel Riley, a U.S. retired Army colonel, tremendous patriot, really hooked in with a lot of people in intelligence community and in patriot community and Christian religious communities, and really sick of the stuff that not only the Democrats under Obama were doing, but the Republicans under, at the time, John Boehner and Mitch McConnell, who's still with us, plaguing us. And so we had this idea that we'd get 1 million people on the mall in Washington, D.C., and it didn't turn out to be 1 million. But what it turned out to be was a lot of committed activists who were doing what I had to do. They were coming out of the woodwork. They were stepping up. They were doing their duty, deciding that they could no longer just sit back and hope for the best. They had to do something. And some of us have a lot of experience. That's why I was helping him. A lot of people were brand new. They'd never done any of this before. So that you can only be brand new once. You can always renew yourself and try and begin again. But these were people who'd never done anything, a lot of them. And you can't say that about them today. If you look at a lot of the leaders in various movements for the liberty side of things, you'll find that a lot of them were there. And there are other seminal events like the Bundy Ranch situation. A lot of the people who came out of there have turned out to be leaders. A lot of us didn't want to be leaders. I've seen memes and stories about the Bible and how God chooses who he chooses. And that, Moses was a stammerer, and this one was a tax collector, and that one was an adulterer, and et cetera. Well, hopefully none of us were really bad people, but we certainly, none of us really wanted this. None of us have been looking for prominence or responsibility over others or power of any kind, and have been treating this sort of situation as being a shepherd. And there have been a lot of missteps along the way. It's been difficult, but I find that the best thing is not that I become like a big leader. It's that I help develop other leaders that can do other things.
Now, whether it's the Bundy Ranch issues or whether it's the organizing for the American Spirit, how do we as local individuals who have local ordinances, governance, etc., how do we start getting involved? We had a guest on the other week, and she was sort of coaching.
Lois Kaneshiki, yeah.
Lois Kaneshiki, yeah.
She's a friend. She's very, very, very smart.
Wonderful. So wonderful. And really encouraging us to get into local volunteerism and help your politicians, understand the local governance. And then, it's important to get local control back and sovereignty-based control back. What's your opinion on that? How do we start changing and getting America back?
Well, it's really easy, actually. And before I get into the politics, I'll tell you right now, I don't care what the issue of your heart is. If it's something good, whether you want to clean up a stream, clean up a highway, save the puppies and kitties, feed old people who are, stuck at home and can't get out. If you want to go help people from the floods in Texas or Florida, if you want to do anything good, I support you in that. And that's how it works, because that success means more. It's easier to be successful the second time. It also means that your example.
Somebody's beeping.
I hear something, yeah. But that example really gets other people involved, it gets interested. It shows them it can be done. Now, in terms of local politics, I followed the tried and true rules. And rules are rules. Rules for radicals, the stuff in the Constitution. Rules are rules. They work for anybody. They worked for the Bolsheviks in 1917. They worked for the Republicans, who elected Trump. They work. And so I used similar rules that Lois did here in my township. We had a problem with corruption. We had 3 corrupt. Yeah, I'll say it. They were corrupt, not big time corrupt. They weren't murdering people or stealing money or anything, but people who had lost their way. And they were running our township. Well, back a few years, what year was that? I can't even remember the date. But a friend of mine who is a Beirut Marine, he was blown up in the Marine barracks attack in Beirut. He's disabled. and he was bored and interested in politics. And he asked me, since I know about politics, what he should do. I said, go to a township meeting. He went to the township meeting and he found out about something called the quality of life ordinances. You might recall a few years back, under Bloomberg, Mayor Bloomberg of New York, put a whole lot of money of his billions into this quality of life ordinance thing that was spreading across New York, New Jersey, Delaware, Pennsylvania. I mean, everywhere. I'm in the Poconos, not that far from you, in the coal regions here in Schuylkill County, and it was in Hazleton, it was in Stroudsburg, it was in Tamaqua, it was in Pottsville, it was in Bloomsburg. It was just spreading. We found out about this. He says, "What is this?" And what it was is the unproven New York theory, the broken window theory, that if you criminalize everything, then you can pick up anyone you want off the street, and you can clean up the streets by getting rid of the gangsters. Well, what it did was it made it so that if your grass was too tall, they could fine you. If you had a sofa on your porch, they could fine you. All kinds of silly things like that. And this is better. The person who gave you the ticket was the hearing officer. So if you appealed it, you went to the person and yeah. Well,
oh my God.
So I told him all about this, and I wrote an article that got some national attention. And so he used that article. He said, "What do we do?" I said, "Go talk to the neighbors. Go talk to everybody." So he went around. He had time. He's disabled. But he went around and talked to everyone. They didn't like this idea either. Well, how do we fix it? So I told him, well, we have to start going to the meetings, because usually if you go to a political meeting, especially a township meeting, you'll see 3 or 4 people, 5 people, and one of them is the same one who's had the same complaints for 15 years that never got fixed, and another one's a reporter, and you might have 1 or 2 others who are just interested. So we started showing up, 10 people, 30 people, 50 people. We had enough people in the summertime that they couldn't all fit into the meeting hall, and they were listening through open windows to the outside. We packed that meeting. We kept packing that meeting. We were asking them questions. We started off with the quality of life ordinances, which, by the way, did not pass here. We're in one of the only places that did not pass. And an election was coming up. We had a police department that was, I'd like to say corrupt, but I can't prove it legally. They were definitely not doing what we asked. They weren't showing up to watch the kids. They weren't keeping the cemetery with all of our ancestors clean of drug users who were defacing it and basically debasing that area. They were covering up for crimes by losing witness statements, not showing up for hearings, things like that, for friends. We didn't like that. So we organized, got some people who knew what to do as far as spreading words. Basically, the one fella, I'll mention him, not his real name, but we call him Yacky because he likes to yak. So we just sent him around with the information. He talked to everybody. We not only packed the meeting, but we won the first commissioner seat out of 3 by 1 vote.
Wow.
1 vote did it. Now, 1 out of 3 does not constitute a majority, so we were still being stymied, but now we're on a roll. So we're asking more questions because things just didn't seem right. Well, turns out that there'd been it looked like an overcharge for many years for our garbage bill. And where's the money? This is a garbage bill. It's not a big issue. It's not geopolitics. It's, but that's our money and that's our services. Well, I'm good at a lot of things, but thank God there's other people who are better than I am. We had a guy who's really good at lawyer type stuff. So he wrote the right to know requests to try and find out. And they pulled the usual, which is try not to answer. And then when you are forced to, just dump, just give them everything they could possibly not be interested in. Give them boxes and boxes of stuff. Well, we have another guy, and he's good at math. He's an engineer who was as a contractor in Afghanistan for the U.S. military. The guy's brilliant at math. So what would have taken me 6 months or a year, and I might have missed it, he took 2 vacation days and he found it, and he found the money that was missing and how much and where it was going, and didn't look good. So we organized to win the second seat. This time we got smart. I first of all, we were getting bad press. The press would not show up. When they did show up, they wouldn't tell what we were saying. When they said what we were saying, they misrepresented it, took it out of context, out and out lied, made it look different. So I said, well, let's videotape everything. Sunshine Law. Well, we knew they'd object. And in Pennsylvania, it's kind of, there's 2 laws. One says you can look at any public meeting, and the other one says, well, you can't record anyone without their permission. So I said, look, we don't have any people who are blind who show up for the meetings. If they do, we'll have to tell them that we're recording. But we found another guy, and he's actually one of our current commissioners now. But he has a wedding video at weddings and graduations and parties. He makes videos. So I said, do you have an old camera? He says, what do you mean? I said, something that works, but something big, a big camera that has, that you can't mistake, on a big tripod with big lights. He says, yeah, I've got one of those still. I said, well, bring it to the meeting. We'll remove one chair. We'll stick it there. And they can't claim that there's no permission, because how can you miss the thing? So unless a blind person comes in. So we started videotaping and sharing that, and the people are like, well, nobody's seeing this. I said, get a YouTube channel. So we start putting it on YouTube. Now, every time the press says something, we go around, and we're very economical. So we took like notebook paper and just made little strips, handwritten. So all it would have is, here's the newspaper article link, and here's the link to our YouTube channel. If you believe what you're seeing in the press, great. But check out the unedited start to finish video of what actually happened at the meeting. So people stopped believing the press. They started putting pressure on the press to do their jobs and tell the truth. And now we're getting even more people to show up. And we wanted to make sure we won. So we got a Republican to run, and we got a Democrat to run. This way, no matter what, no matter who won in the primary, we'd still have a shot at winning that second seat. And then the Republican, who had served as a county commissioner, done his duty way back in the early 1960s, an old fella, great guy, and he passed away suddenly. He was 80 years old, so he died. And the person we were running against, who is, I'm not going to mention her name, but she's the chief of staff to a very powerful state senator. And I don't think she likes me very much. But she was going around during the primary saying, hey, vote for him out of his memory. And we went around and said, listen, you know what he wanted. He wanted clean government again. So if you really care about him, then if you're a Republican, vote for the guy who he was running with as a Republican, or a Democrat, even though he was a Republican. And if you're a Democrat, write in his name. Well, we had the largest turnout for the Democrats that we'd ever had since FDR, and he won on that side. And then we had the Republicans. He came within 3 votes of, as a write-in, taking away the seat from I'll say she's a corrupt woman. She wasn't always. I hope she's redeemed and comes back. So she dropped out at the last possible minute. We had 2 seats within 3 months of taking the majority. We had changed our police force. They do their jobs now. They don't intimidate people. They don't ignore crime. They don't pick on people. They don't play favorites. Okay. And they do a very good job. We have a new garbage hauler who's local. So the money stays local. It's cheaper. We found money that was missing. Tons of things that had not been done for decades in this township that weren't done properly are now being done. And it's a short-term cost that's going to be like flood control. Well, everybody knows what kind of rain we've had this year, clearing out all the gutters. So these are little matters, but we won. And now this fall, we've got the third one, and I think we're going to take that one too. That's how easy it is, folks. That's how easy it is. And you know what? When you're one person or two or three people, it's difficult. It really, really is difficult. For years, when I was working behind the scenes in politics and things weren't going really well for Liberty, it was the same few people who would show up at meetings every few months. We'd talk about the problems, make plans, and nothing would ever happen because we just didn't have anyone behind us. But when you have people who show up, and that's all you got to do, when you show up and you ask questions and you insist on answers, you can change anything. People say right now, and I know you've been active in fighting against the NDAA, which is a national political matter that says that the president can designate you or I or anyone as an enemy combatant, have us taken in the middle of the night by unmarked soldiers to an indefinite detention at an undisclosed location and tortured or killed. That's what it says legally.
Right.
And they're not doing it. They're not doing it. You know, there's a lot of things they could do. You look at the IRS targeting of conservative groups, including some very good friends of mine. Some of the organizations simply wanted, like True the Voter, the constitutional, I forget what it's called, COOL. It's constitutional education thing here in Pennsylvania. Very nice people. And they did target, but they didn't target everybody. You know why they don't target everybody? Because they can't. Do you know why they want us to think that they're winning and that they have control? Because that gets us to stop doing anything, to not start doing anything. The fact is, if they had the kind of control that they want, like they have in communist China, like they have in Venezuela, if they had that kind of control, people would be dying. People who with big mouths like you and me, people who tell truth to power, we wouldn't be around very long.
Maybe executed.
Well,
yep.
This is the historical pattern. I don't care what ism it is. I have yet to see a difference or a different result. If you look at North Korea today, and I know you're from Korea, so this is, you would probably have relatives who have to live under that. If you look at Nazi Germany or Soviet Russia or communist China, or for God's sakes, Idi Amin's Uganda. It doesn't even matter. He didn't even have an ideology. He had tertiary syphilis. His brain was rotted. But if you look at any place where concentrated power has been gotten to the extent where they can do what they want, first they go after their enemies, the real ones. Then they go after the potential enemies. Then they go after people within their ranks who might be potential enemies. Then they just go after anyone at random just to keep everyone on their toes. It fails. With the only difference between North Korea today and Nazi Germany, even though one was supposedly right and one is supposedly left, is language, uniform, and the kind of gun they're carrying. If you're an average person there's no difference. They can take what you want. Look at Saddam Hussein. Anywhere you go, look at the mullahs in Iran. I mean, I'm a Jewish guy, and my family was more than decimated by the Holocaust. Of the people who remained behind, some 400 relatives who didn't come to America, all but 2 were murdered. They were exterminated. My great-grandparents were killed, cousins killed. And they say never again, and yet it's happened again. It's happened in Rwanda, in Cambodia. It happens in Darfur. There's currently in the Middle East, there's a genocide of Christians going on. And this is the way things do happen when you let power go rampant. And it could happen here. People say it couldn't. It could happen here. But there's an easy solution, which is take back your power. You don't have to run for U.S. Senate or governor. Those are statewide officers. They cost $100 million. You don't have to be famous. You don't have to be really a well-spoken person. You don't have to be brilliant. You don't have to be any of these things. What you have to be is interested in the truth and stubborn enough to stick it out. And It never hurts. You know, there are people out there who really say, I have nothing to add. I have nothing to give. I'm not good at math. I can't publicly speak. I can't do research. I don't know how to. You know what? There are people who are just nice to be around. And if you can get some of those people to show up at your meetings, that's invaluable. My wife, okay, she does not do politics. And I'm in my office here up in the attic. Aside from this spot and outside the house, there's no politics in the house because she likes to have a normal life. You know, I'm kind of obsessed with this. You know, mow the lawn, do the dishes, sit down meals together, watch a show. I mean, normal things. Do the gardening. But she does like to bake. Just one of the things she's really good at, and she bakes cookies. And sometimes for meetings, she'll bake some cookies. You think, well, what's that do? What's that important? Yeah, actually, you go to a political meeting. I don't care what it's for. The first hour, your behind starts to hurt. The second hour, your ears start to bleed, and the third hour, you're resolved never to do this ever again, unless you have one of those nice people who's fun to be around and some cookies, some really good.
Hey, there you go.
If you have a few of those, you think, this wasn't that bad. I think I'll go to another one of those meetings. Everyone's got.
Hey, that's the secret touch right there, Dan. You got it's the cookies.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh goodness. Well, it's been a pleasure and honor to have you on today. And this is empowering. We sometimes feel like we're the minority. We feel like we're powerless, helpless, you name it. But of course, we're made to feel that way if we could just step out, get out, volunteer, bring cookies, talk with our people, sit in township meetings. I mean, it's just as simple as that. And just start getting involved in the process. That's how we start affecting real change and getting back control from the oligarchs. And it almost seems like some kind of fantastic, fantastical drama or some kind of dialogue we're having. We're just talking in our heads. But this is the reality. This is how normal people are taking back their counties from this type of centralized power, with no accountability to the public, just, running, doing whatever they want. And it just takes normal people who get a little involved, start activating with their townships, the people in their neighborhoods, and just showing up. Be stubborn, as you said. Folks, it's time to take America back as we end our broadcast today. Thanks so much, Dan, for being on with us. It's been a real pleasure. Patriot, please let people know how they can get in touch with you, maybe some of your websites. Let us know how we can follow up on what you're doing.
Well, I still have a lot of problems with taking being a public face, but I guess I am. I don't have a website, but I got Facebook, and it's Dan Gray, DanGray, and there's a picture of me looking like me, wearing the same black shirt, and it's an arrow shirt, holding a sword. I'm also on
the man with the sword.
Hey, I don't understand it. Jim DeMint was right. People have been telling me this my whole life, and people have probably been telling your listeners, each one of you, people have been telling you, you could do this. You're good at that. And you've been ignoring them. And because it's not necessarily what you want to do. But God doesn't ask you. God gives you the choice. And this is my belief, that whether you will do something or not. And you can choose to do something that or nothing. And you can choose to do something that doesn't make any sense. But whatever gifts he's given you, and we all have gifts, use them. So I find that on social media, for some reason that I still cannot fathom, people really like this stuff that I put out. And more important than that, people learn from this, because I'm not the expert on everything, but I've got friends who are experts on just about everything. And I've met people who are just working regular jobs, clerks at convenience stores or at Lowe's or Home Depot or wherever, and a chance remark about something about politics starts a conversation, and everyone's on some kind of social media. So I said, check me out on Facebook, Twitter. And my only rule on my particular page is you have to be nice. You have to, you can criticize the idea, but don't be mean to the other person or use curse words or any of that sort of thing. And I'll find these newbies will start paying attention and listening. And then bit by bit, they start interacting. They start asking questions. And then they read and learn. And then they start making statements and they grow. You know, at the time of the revolution, 3 million people in this country, and we had so many founders, hundreds of founders. If you look at the people who not only signed the Declaration and the Constitution and who fought in the wars as officers, but it was much more than that. It was the average person, the everyday person.
Yes.
And, you know, we need a lot more leaders. We have over 300 million people in this country. I refuse to believe that even with the education system being as cruddy as it is, that we can't all find someone in our communities to step up. And again, politics, yeah, it's important. But you know why there's all those regulations about every little thing that you do, trying to keep you from doing anything on your own? It's because they're scared of individuals having power and making decisions, because even if you're the cause of your heart, and this, by the way, is something, this one works for the left or the right. If you care about, let's say, spaying and neutering animals and no-kill shelters and no cruelty to animals, if you care about that, a lot of people have heart. They do care about that. Go do something about it. You'll find that there are rules, regulations, and political things. There are laws about that try and stop you from doing what you think is important and that we all agree on is right. So fight them. And if that's the only issue you fight on, or whatever it is that you care about, a win is a win. It teaches you to win. It teaches other people that they can win. And there's an awful lot of overlap. I'm one of the people who goes to all these different issues, all these different groups. And when I go to a pro-life gathering, I see a few people I know from the pro-Second Amendment issue. And when I go to one of those gatherings, I find some people I know who are against misuse of police power, against police brutality. And then when I go to one of those meetings, I find a few people who are interested in and work really hard about public corruption, you know, taking money, making backroom deals. And I go to one of those meetings and I find people who are interested in urban renewal or in any number of other issues. There's a lot of overlap. So whatever you want to do out there, do it. And
it's about getting involved, getting started. Sometimes the first step is the hardest, isn't it?
It is. You know what? One of the things I was going to talk about was renewal. I burned out a lot of times. I tend to go 2 speeds. I'm either off, and you have to put a mirror under my nose to see if I'm breathing, or on. And when I'm on, it's 100% full bore. God has blessed me with a lot of energy, but I'm not in, you know, just somebody who, I'm getting old. So when you burn out, what you need to do is step back. Let other people that you've taught, that you've trained, that you've helped, that you've given an example to, let them step up. Let them do some things. Encourage them. But
yes.
Not to step back like, oh, I've done my part. Till you're dead, you haven't done all you're supposed to do. But to step back so that you can rejuvenate, so that you can think about the lessons that you might have missed because you were too busy, so that you can restore your health. And there's another thing about renewal, and beginners, we're only a beginner once, but see, I'm a simple guy. Every time I have had to step back and go, I can't do this anymore. What did I learn? What did I do wrong? What did I do right? What works? When I start back in fact, every single day, I try and start from a point that, as if I don't know anything, as if I've never done anything. And the reason is because beginners, they look at things honestly. Sometimes some of the best ideas I found in politics haven't come from experienced people who know all the ins and outs, who know where all the bodies are buried. Sometimes it's people who've never done this at all, who just look at it with fresh eyes and say, the emperor has no clothes. You know?
Very much so. Dan, thank you so much once again for joining us and having you into overdrive. But thank you so much for giving us some of that insight, that wisdom, and giving us some encouragement that we, the people, can make a difference. We are the ones with the sovereignty. The Bible says, let no man take your crown. That represents our sovereignty. And we understand that at the same time, sovereign peoples must also have the right to territory and freedom, liberty, and also the means to defend themselves. So we pray all the kings and queens of the kingdom of God, keep your crowns and keep your rods of iron and stand with sovereignty, get active, get local. Hey, start showing up at township meetings, start showing up at commissioners' volunteer groups, pray for them, pray for our politicians, pray for the people who are, working with you, network with people. Just get out. God is going to use you. He has mighty plans for each and every one of us, especially the ones that are standing under his banner of sovereignty. We thank you so much for joining us this morning. Thank you, Dan, for joining us on the King's Report. And we will see you tomorrow, 5 a.m. sharp. God bless, Godspeed, and may his kingdom come.
God bless.
Thanks so much. Thank you. Great to meet you.